Prior to the suspension, this Honorable Chamber was in Standing Finance Committee. To that we shall resume.
Standing Finance Committee resumes with Head 82. The man that wanted to speak. Can we begin with the continue with the Honorable Member from St. George North.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I waited for a long time to speak and to compliment my friend, Minister of Environment, who I believe have done a very wonderful job, both he and his team. He has an excellent team. He has an excellent manager at the Sanitation Department as well as NCC. And he has a number of technical officers who are very experienced and well trained. I listened to the debate, Madam Chair, even though I was not in the chair. Thank God for the technology. And I could not help but thinking that this is one ministry, one department that have shown that the last 10 years was really the 10 lost years. Because this department has come to alive in the last 2 years, less than 2 years, and have really beautified not only the highways and byways, but people are now energized to be very conscious about their environment. In my area, St. George, I have seen better garbage collection, and I'm very thankful. I had to compliment the sanitation department that responded very quickly. We had an incident that was there for a long time, and when they called the management, she was not there, but the supervisors readily and came to our assistance. I want to thank them. But one of the things that hurt me while I listened to this debate today is the dump at St. Thomas. I could not understand, and I think the manager of the art department put it this way, that between 2010 and 2018, there were no large compactor to keep the garbage down and the smell down. And this was, to my mind, a dereliction of duty for the last administration. And this is very important because the people of Barbados sensitized that this department and that the last government was really treating the people of this country with scant respect. And that's why the people are always right. For 10 years, there was no proper compactor to keep the garbage down, and it smelled. People of Sandy Lane and Bonnets and Arch Hall and those people had to endure. And they should really put the government in court again, because this, to me, my mind, is a bad thing. And within less than 2 years, we were able to get a new compactor. So we want to thank the ministry for that. We want to really thank the ministry for that. And I want to ask the minister, though, what can you tell me why the building at St. Thomas was built for $28 million? Who informed? Was it a PPC decision? Was it a decision of the ministry, or was it the decision of the political directorate? Because something, the people of Barbados must not continue to suffer because of when politicians make a bad decision. $28 million, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, is not 28 cents. $28 million going down, and it's a sick building. I have heard that the manager of the sanitation saying that nobody has gone in there, and it's a sick building already. The people of Barbados needs to ask this question: who informed the building of this building? Who informed it? And then you have private sector involvement too. Who are the private sector? You see, I am told that I should not ask these questions because we have to ask these questions. We have to ask this question: who were the private sector involved in this building? Why did it cost, and how much are we supposed to pay, and how long are we supposed to pay for this? That's my first question to the minister.
Thank you, Chair. Let me respond as good as I can. I've been told that I have a maximum. I was told
You say you have asked this, you have answered this question, question already?
about 20 minutes. The reality is that they had many problems. As soon as we took up office, we recognized that there were lots of issues related to the landfill, lots of issues related to the building of vault close. They were fully aware that we had to be using a D9 tractor on the landfill, which did not have the required weight in order to compress the waste on the landfill. And we understood we understand the difficulty in relation to the oxygen being in the soil, and we knew the potential that could easily come from that. As a result, the sanitation services ordered a compactor, and it's a very big compactor. It has some. It is completely different to the D9 that we are talking about. Not only in weight, but the size and the kind of wheels which it has. When it goes on the landfill, it is really a compactor. It pushes the soil down. So all the air, the oxygen comes out of the soil at present. I can't tell you exactly what was happening in relation to what that government was doing, but we understand the importance of doing what we had to do at that specific time. Along with the importation of trucks, we knew that we had to also bring additional equipment, which the concerns about the trucks overshadowed all the additional equipment we had to bring in. We knew that we had a major problem with that building at vault close as well. I can also tell you that there was some little provision inside the contract that placed in the hands of a member in high office of the party then that was in office called the LP. That officer was in possession of 2 motor cars, which even after they say that the building would have been handed over to us, I had to ask officers to keep a close eye and see if they can find these cars anywhere across the sovereignty of Barbados. After making a pronouncement in public about the motor cars, 2 or 3 days after, I went to vault close and I saw one of the cars parked on the outside of the building. I cannot even tell you where those 2 cars are now. I was under tremendous pressure for the payment of $500,000 to a specific individual, and I know that is a fact because I received the correspondence within the ministry itself, and the individual on more than one occasion asked me. I told him I have seen nothing in writing that shows that he had a contract with the SSA or with the Ministry of the Environment, and therefore he could not pay. I believe $500,000, and the individual was supposed to produce a report and all of that in relation to that building on the landfill. There are lots of not just severe acts that are not so wholesome, but infelicities that occurred on the landfill. I wish I could really go into detail. Probably at some later date I'll be able to speak more on some of the concerns that we need to address, because I don't want the public to be left with just speculation. I don't want the members of this honorable chamber to be left with just speculation and not knowing the genuine material facts related to all that has transpired in that small geography there in St. Thomas. I will speak to that at another date.
Thank you. The other question I want to ask, though, is what what is the ministry doing in terms of those trucks that travel across Barbados with all types of garbage? Sometimes they don't have the net on them. It seems to me that there's no proper regulation. That offal could be dropped into the streets. You have a number of all types of things going to the landfill without any proper storage. Now, sometimes when these trucks have to turn around the roundabouts, sometimes they drop their deposits into the roundabout, and we see it often, especially with cement trucks, all types of garbage is dropped in the road. How is the ministry responding to these things? Is there any regulation, or is where anybody could do anything?
I think that if you were here, and I can appreciate that you were absent, a comprehensive answer was given before in relation to trucks traveling along the coastal area.
I didn't hear that question.
Right, with that type of material, even waste that comes from tourist liners as well, waste from the markets.
So you're saying that there are regulations?
Yes, but the ministry
so
itself,
nobody
the ministry
police these things?
The legislation and the legislation or the legal instruments don't permit us independently to take a stand against delinquent truck drivers who are moving that kind of waste across the entire landscape. We have to work in collaboration, and I don't know if sometime in the future we look to see if we can resolve that problem by either having some kind of memorandum of understanding or some officer within the ministry that could perform the duties, but obviously functioning underneath the Ministry of Health as a Ministry of Health officer working in collaboration with the Environmental Protection Department, or we will have to make the required amendments to the legislation to give the appropriate powers and authority to the officer within the ministry to bring any charge against such an individual. But I don't only want to identify some of the negations, especially when working with private waste haulers and so on, because during the last 2 years, we could not have done as good as we did. You know when you're trying to do something good in bad conditions and with limited cash, the reality is that it would have been worse had not for the work and the contribution made by the private waste haulers,
Right.
in helping us to clean up the mess all around Barbados. And even if there were a number of breaches to what they were doing, even with trucks and so on, I believe that the outcome is worthy of some level of mitigation, some level of mercy, and I don't believe that we should come down in any way or even say anything to make them feel offended by the contribution which they have made. We don't even know what motives or major motive would have been responsible for a government in office to what you might believe and I might believe is being involved in the form of negligence. It might not be negligence. There might be a deliberate attempt to keep things in the form that they were in, making it more and more complicated so that they can gain benefits from a system that had no proper checks and balances or no regulations or even probably no provisions in law to govern the institutions and the way in which things were happening at this specific time. Sometimes people like to leave things in such a state deliberately because their profit materially and monetarily as a result of leaving them in the form. And I think that is a consideration that Barbadians would have to make. I believe that is the most I can do
Thank
in
you.
terms of responding.
I don't want to push you further because
We
I
have
know
10
that-
minutes left, just to remind
Right.
you.
I just want to ask you one last question about the low estate dump. That was another dump
Yeah,
that
but you
was
take 10 minutes to
illegal,
ask the question.
and of course, my
You take 10
constituents
minutes
would
to
be
ask the question.
remiss of me. It would be remiss of me if I did not ask you about the low estate dump. That was done some years ago by a private developer, and I understand that the ministry had asked to stop, and I believe that something is being done because it is now, there's no more dumping at the low estate dump, but I hope that your ministry will continue to monitor it and ensure that the person who did it would continue to clean up that site so that the persons in the low estate area, Hattersall area, and the surrounding area will have some form of relief for now and the future. Because it appears to me that because there are no policing, people just do as they like. And I heard the member for St. Thomas made this comment over today that in her constituency, people just dump, because there's no checks and balances. So I hope that your ministry, along with the Ministry of Health and the other departments, could ensure that we have not only training for people and sensitizing people, especially those in the schools, about the reality of our environment. We are living in a very environmental challenging times with all the respiratory problems that we are having, and therefore it is incumbent for you as the environment minister not only to teach people about climate change and the environment, but from the school right down, but we need to be aware of these things. And those persons who dump should not only be hauled before the court, but punishment should be meted out as desired. I can go on and on, but we only
Please
have
don't.
limited time, so I want you to be conscious of this, because this is a very important ministry.
Conrad, in the interest of time and the comfort to everybody here, I would just like to let you know that we're doing all that we can to resolve the issue at Low Estate. I don't believe that any of the brokers across Barbados got involved in what we were doing with any ill will. And what I'm trying to do is to try to understand these challenges and work collectively to try to see how we can resolve that problem.
Thank you. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, ma'am. And I have 5 questions, which I'll put to you all at once, as quickly as I'm able so to do. And I start where the Honorable Member for St. George North took us, and that is to St. Thomas on the Vaucluse building. My particular concern is not what went down and why the building cost so much, etc., but what is the plan for the building going forward, if any? That's one question. Second question, and if anything has been said with reference to this that constitutes an answer, you can just wave me on. And that is an update on the Care Hill matter. You referred to it earlier as a very ugly experience. Governance in Barbados. So we would just humbly like to ask for an update on that matter if you're in a position to give it. There's an amount of money requested in the estimates here for a project, the Concept Bay Green project. And just to ask some enlightenment as to what that is about. The fourth question has to do with perhaps the philosophical premise which you set for us this morning. The successes of tourism, I am sure, would have gendered some of the challenges which your ministry would face with respect to sanitation services and also relative to environmental concerns. And you told us philosophically this morning that as societies evolve, populations explode, the capacity of the state to provide becomes limited and challenges and tensions arise therefrom. The successes of tourism and even the vision being enunciated for tourism going forward portend some serious challenges for the ministry that you have responsibility to lead. And I would like to hear from you, your team. What is your experience thus far? How is tourism impacting in any negative way upon the services you try to provide in relation to your capacity? So to do, the last one is a little bit perhaps parochial, but very general as well. I've observed often at the Westbury Cemetery when services for the dead are being conducted, there is a nuisance of noise that comes from kite flying in the Westbury area. I've also seen once or twice the nuisance of noise coming from loud music being played around the precincts of the cemetery. And my question would be, is there anything that can be done, any consideration given to at least some degree of regulation that would help to minimize this nuisance? And I don't mean to be overly critical, but while I am on that, I have to say as well that those in the public cemetery at Westbury who are responsible for opening and covering graves do not always conduct themselves in the most appropriate of ways when engaging in their duties. I've seen dress situations which, to me, call for some address, and I have seen and heard behaviors expressed which, to me, are totally inappropriate and insensitive to the moment. And I just wanted to draw that to your attention.
Thank you, Leader of the Opposition, Comrade Ali. First of all, because of time, constraints of time, I would not be able to give any extensive answer to these things. But you obviously, what you stated about the Westbury Cemetery, you yourself recognize the kind of noise that you're hearing there constitutes a nuisance. I don't have to tell you if you can establish that a nuisance is occurring, somebody must be offended by the nuisance, and there's a form of civil action that can be taken in order to address these issues. Obviously, if there's any workers that if there are any workers that are behaving in a manner that we consider injurious to the expectations and the standard that we set in the workforce, the department would address those things. So we are quite willing, if we get any reports about any specific person, because I can't tell you if it's a worker, I can't tell you if it's the members of the family, because I also know when people are in mourning, sometimes they make loud noises, and sometimes they're not rational. But just report to us if you discover such a thing. All I can say to you is we are looking now at correcting the wrongs. We are looking at correcting the wrongs in relation to what has transpired at the building at Vault Close. That to go into all of that, we have tried in many ways. As I told you before, there were plans for leasehold arrangement where person would have taken full control of the building, and they would have done whatever they had to do in order to make it conducive to the service that they were wanting to offer. I'm not even sure if those discussions are completed. I'm not sure if the answer would be a very positive one, but I will try to inquire about that. The Cahill issue, what the former AG used to call sub-juicy. The learned lawyer. The matter is now sub judice. The layman knows that it's sub judice. The Attorney General of Barbados constantly repeated sub juice, just like other persons. Just like other persons were told the word is not physical, the word is fiscal, and the Congress still said physical. So we had a very strange group with a very unorthodox understanding of the English language. And Conrad, I wish I could really go into detail, but apparently we have finite arrangements for how long we can conduct these affairs. I've been given notice that I must now summons up. I did all that I can to facilitate everybody as much as I can with what authority lies with me. I now want to express my great gratitude to not only those within earshot of my voice within these chambers, but to those within earshot of my voice on the outside as well. Those people who are listening to us on radio and on television, who are watching it on television, I want to give my gratitude and my appreciation for the level of tolerance that they have shown over the last 2 years, the appreciation for the challenges which we'll be going through the Ministry of the Environment, and I want to thank them, and eternally so, for enduring the challenges they too had to face in the circumstances. I also want to thank everybody today for making sure that they keep this debate as relevant and directly to the point, with not much of it, and I will hope if there's one person that would have contributed to things that are extraneous, it would have been me, and I apologize to myself under those circumstances. But in general, I think we had a good debate, and in general, we try to accommodate everyone, even where there was some challenges from the Conrad leader of the opposition. We did all that we can to make sure that he's very much
You still had a couple questions to answer.
I have more?
Yeah, he gave you 5. I wrote them down so you know. Concept big, was it?
Yes, ma'am, I had assumed my honorable friend didn't have the answers, so he skirted the issue.
Well, the concept, I was trying to wrap up because I received this kind of paper, asked me to wrap up.
Okay, just let me know, it'd be nice.
The concept bay, I think the other thing was concept bay, and it didn't answer to that because that project is no more, as far as I know. As far as I know, it is no. Huh? I've been informed because of my lack of retention. I've been informed that you answered that question in relation to
the impact of this tourism success on your lives.
Well, I would love to talk to you about the other side of paradise. I have my perception of how we should go forward. I believe that I've been indicating that to you as I respond to some of the concerns within the Ministry of Culture, what kind of tourism I feel that we ought to have. But that is only Minister of the Environment's perspective.
Yeah, but with all due respect, Honourable Minister, I know what you've told me, but I'm asking this question for the information of the public.
Yeah. Well, I believe I still have a duty, especially if I put in a hard alternative. I still feel I have a duty, and the public would quite understand, because I believe that we're at the level of intelligence now that people understand. Sometimes in this business, there's a form of role playing, and sometimes, and you know that well in the church, there are certain things that are expected of you. Though there might be other temptations, sometimes you're guided by the principles of the church, and as a result, those external factors keep you in line. That you respect all moral principles regardless of how strong the temptations are. In the circumstances, I would not go outside to say exactly how I feel, because based on the principles of collective responsibility within the cabinet system, I would not do that and then create unnecessary antagonism within the cabinet setting. I promise that I will have a word with you, and I will speak about it in public at the appropriate
I totally understand, ma'am, and I accept that.
So we're done. Go ahead. That included your summary, right? Yeah. Words. Great. question is that head 82 in the amount of $89,113,756 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. Oh, loss. That was a rough one. So you got 2 minutes? 2 more hours? Sick of this. Driving me nuts, man.
Madam Chairman, Head 46, Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy, in the sum of $15,653,480.
Madam Chair, I beg your permission to allow my staff to join me, please.
So granted. Thank you. Honorable Minister, you're invited to introduce your team, make your opening remarks, and ask to move the head at the end.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm like to introduce my team and then take my 10 minutes. To my right is my permanent secretary, Ms. Foster. To my left is Ms. Blackman, the Chief Technical Officer in the Ministry. Immediately behind the PS is Senator Lisa Cummings, who's Chairman of the Port. To her left is Ms. Leslie, who's the Chief Fisheries Officer Acton. To her left is Dr. Leo Brewster, who's the head of the Coastal Zone Management Unit. Behind Senator Cummings is David John Marie, the CEO of the Port. Mr. Ward, who is our climate change specialist in the Ministry, to his left. Ms. Holder, who is head of the Bridgetown Fisheries, to his left. Mr. Ricardo Arthur, behind Mr. David John Marie, and he manages the project in Coastal Zone Management. To his left is the Deputy Director of Coastal Zone, and no, that's it. I was hoping the Senior Admin Officer would be in that chair, but she hasn't yet taken it, but I assume she will by the time we're done. Ms. Nelson. Madam Chair, I wish to use this opportunity really, first of all, to thank the people of St. Michael South actually for allowing me to be here. I also want to use the opportunity to thank the Prime Minister for the opportunity to serve as Minister of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy, and my colleagues for all the support that I have received over the last year and a half. I believe we spent the last 16, 17 months in office giving meaning to what the blue economy is. I think most Barbadians now understand it. I think they understand its importance to Barbadian society at this time. And I think it gives some purpose as well to the country. And hopefully by the time I am through with my presentation, we will both agree. I believe that in the last year and a half, sir, ma'am, we have established ourselves in terms of leadership in the blue economy, both in Barbados, but also in the region and certainly internationally. The number of requests that have been made of the ministry now in terms of our expertise in areas that we fast develop expertise is amazing. There's some very new and exciting initiatives on the table, but I think the thing that we must do well is balance the traditional areas known to Barbadians in the blue economy, but to manage those new and exciting areas in a way that do not jeopardize the traditional ways we've known. And in a nutshell, for the purposes of this conversation, the blue economy really is about managing and preserving the ocean in a way that does not allow people to overly exploit it, while at the same time using it to generate areas of production, to maintain and improve livelihoods, while at the same time respecting the fact that the ocean has been there long before us and hopefully will be there long after we're gone, and recognizing that some of our own practices as a people have actually endangered our own lives by endangering the ocean. So I just want Madam Chair to go through very quickly some of the programs we're doing in the ministry and the various departments, and allow my staff and the other persons associated with the ministry to speak in more detail to some of these issues and some of these things. In the ministry itself, we've had great partnerships, and I think one of the things that we've done very well is to develop partnerships. We have partnerships with the IDB, FAO, UNDP, all the agencies here in terms of the embassies and high commissions that have allowed us to do some work even with minimal expenditure, recognizing that partnerships is a new way to do business. And specifically, you would have heard us announce a ban on plastics, and that has gone extremely well. We've done so in a way that I believe respects the fact that Barbados also has persons who had imported some of the petroleum-based plastics that we banned, but also manufacturers of plastic bags, whom we try to bring along in the process as we rolled out on this principal position in relation to the banning of petroleum-based plastics. Indeed, in 2 weeks' time, we were supposed to be in London speaking to the Commonwealth Clean Ocean Alliance about our ban on plastics, which many in the world, including the UK, have now set as a best practice. Obviously, circumstances in the world, as well as our own estimates, do not allow us to go, but the circumstances in the world have everyone thinking now about traveling. Secondly, Madam Chair, we spent a significant period of time pursuing a debt for nature swap, and I will speak to that in more detail later. But that is where, for example, a country or an international organization or an NGO primarily would be interested in purchasing some of your debt. Barbados was well poised for it because we had such high debt. They would purchase some of your debt and use the savings to do work in the marine space. In our case, Barbados was poised to do, they were going to buy $200 million of our debt, and that would give them $250 million because they would have bought it at a discount. Because people would have sold the debt to them, because Barbados was in so much debt, people would sell the debt at a cheaper price, and the savings we would have been able to use in the marine space. But the truth is Barbados performed so well that nobody is selling Barbados' debt, which is kudos to the Minister of Finance and the ministers in the Ministry of Finance for doing such an excellent job, because our debt is not trading at a discount. But for me, it meant that I could not get the additional money to do work. Thank you so much. To do the additional work that I wanted in the marine space. We also came in and found a situation where sargassum seaweed was rampant. It still is. But the issue was that there was no real management plan for the sargassum seaweed. No real one in the ministry anyway. And we brought together a management plan that sees us working with the Defense Force, the NCC. UNDP has also helped us with the plan. We've been able to acquire in Barbados a seaweed harvester, which is a boat that would actually take the seaweed directly off of the sea. And it's going to be a game changer for us in the fight against the seaweed. We just worked on establishing 2 marine labs, marine biotechnology labs, where we will work on processing that seaweed and trying to see what we can convert it into in terms of a productive end as well. So we are not only working to get rid of the seaweed, but to find meaningful ways to convert the seaweed into something that is also very useful. So those are a few of the things that we've done so far in the ministry. As well, we've been working with the FAO and the Argentine Embassy on a fish silage project, where we decided that instead of wasting all the fish offals, I heard in the Ministry of Environment people talking about the offals being thrown in the dump. If we could take those offals and convert it into something as well. So we've been working on that in the ministry, and we have had some fairly positive results. As it stands, Cardi is now leading the battle for us in relation to that regard. In the port, and I'll go through these examples very quickly, Madam Chair, so we could get into the questions. But in the port, they've been doing some transformational work. As you know, we inherited a situation where cruise and cargo, for many years, for time immemorial, in Barbados hasn't been separated. And we made a promise as a government that we wanted to separate cruise and cargo. Those conversations are advanced. We had the hindrance of old contracts that were signed before we came into office, some that we did not think were in the best interest of the government that we are renegotiating, while at the same time having conversations with new partners about building out new contracts so that we could separate cruise and cargo in a way that is favorable to Barbados. And I think that is the significant difference between what we are doing and what was done. We've also had a town hall meeting to launch the cruise facility in the north. It is our intention there to be able to hold small cruise ships, mega yachts, and to be able to develop that concept for a few. I think as it's proposed, we're thinking about $40 million, but that will be a tentative arrangement, and that is going to be through PPP as well. So we will see how that evolves. At the shallow draft, we also want to be able to have small yachts there as well and allow more vessels in at the port. Right now, I think they can only accommodate about 50 vessels. So that as we expand, we have the facilities to be able to accommodate the vast expansion that we're doing. And I think very importantly as well, also at the port, we're looking at a haul-out facility. Barbados currently does not have any real haul-out facilities for vessels. We have one at Concept Bay. I'll speak to that in a minute, but that needs some repair. But this is one, and by the time I'm through, Madam Chair, you will hear that we will have about 3 proper haul-out facilities. We also want to do a berth in the port, cargo berth in the north, that would allow us to handle bigger cruise ships. As you know, the cruise ships are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think as the port evolves, we have to be able to evolve in a way that would allow us to accommodate some of these larger cruise ships. I've had the privilege, Madam Chair, of being chairman of the subcommittee of the social partnership to look at port efficiency, in which we have a number of persons in the private sector. Our intention there is to move Barbados to a point where it becomes the most efficient in terms of handling cargo and crews in the region, and hopefully at some point in time in the world. And to do that, we have regular meetings where we look at the containers, how many are in the port, why they're still in the port, how many have been cleared, how many have not been cleared, which ones are stuck in customs, which ones are with the brokers. And we've systematically and significantly reduced the number of containers in the port, and we continue to do so over time, but this is through partnership, and this will all help to increase the efficiency. Look, if we become more efficient, we increase our competitiveness, we generate more revenue for the country, we reduce our security risk as well, so that the port overall functions as a much more efficient unit. In terms of fisheries, Madam Chair, we are amending some fisheries policies to issue licenses for fishing. Right now, pretty much anybody could fish, but we want to make sure people have a license when they go to fish, because it would allow us to manage the situation as well. We also have a concern internationally with IUU, illegal, unregulated, unreported fishing, which for me is a major concern. We have to manage it locally, but we also have to manage it internationally. I have a concern, and I've expressed it on more than one occasion. You've seen a number of people catching these very young dolphins. In fact, in the paper recently, there was an article about having only to sell these whole dolphins. The reality is that, yes, there is a new breeding dolphin that is smaller, but what you're seeing is people catching young dolphins and these juvenile fish before they have a chance to spawn, thereby destroying a whole industry. I want to bring legislation. I mean, I would have hoped to have brought it before, but I've told the chief that I want it urgently to prevent people from catching these young juvenile dolphin, so that we could allow the industry to expand. I know the opposition leader is reading the estimates. In the estimates, the numbers, you would see a 1.5 million again for Concept Bay. Again, I just mentioned that there was no hollow facility at Concept Bay. There was one, but it was broken and badly in need of repair for years. So the 1.5 million is to repair that so we could haul out the vessels in the event that people need to haul out their vessels at Concept Bay. We're also doing some significant work at the Pile Bay landing site, Madam Chair. We've had a town hall meeting there as well that will see the Pile Bay site is in desperate need of repair. And we're going to transform the site. The drawings are outstanding, and we're hoping within the next month to begin the work there at Pile Bay, and also to do some fendering and Bridgetown. So there are a number of things. In the markets, Madam Chair, the markets to me are, and I say it all the time, but they are the most glaring example of the neglect of the people by the last administration. Because there's not, you could pick any of the markets, or could have, because we repaired a few, but you could have picked any of the markets and found the markets in a tremendous state of disrepair. We've already started doing work at Spitestone. We've transformed Spitestone. We've done significant work at Oystons. We've also done significant work in Bridgetown. We're about to start Tent Bay. And hopefully before the year is through and during the next financial year, we intend to do some work at Paynes Bay and Concept Bay and do the drawings for Western as well. So we're going to be doing a number of markets over the course of this year while continuing to work on Oystons and Bridgetown, because the amount of repairs needed there are just so significant. We put Skeets Bay out to RFP, as you know, Madam Chair, to find the best use for Skeets Bay. And we could discuss that further. In shipping, and I will wrap up now. In shipping, Madam Chair, we have done also some work. We came in May 2018, and Barbados was audited between June 23rd and July in 2018 as well. And the audit found that there were a number of areas where Barbados fell down, so we have a corrective action plan that would, once we stick by our action plan, is going to bring Barbados in line with these international regulations. I have great hopes of seeing Barbados represented on the IMO Council, the International Maritime Organization Council, in the near future. We're going to make a bid soon, but doing this work is all part of it. Generate more funds from the registry as well. I think we can do it. We've done also the Maritime Single Window, which the port, in conjunction with the ministry, is working on. This would allow us, Madam Chair, to expedite business in the port. You have a single window whereby you come and you do all your forms online, and once you've done it one place, it allows you to come through. You're keeping the forms are consistent from port to port. It allows us to be ahead again of the game in the Caribbean. Everybody has to do it. We're just hoping to be ahead. All these things, when we do this, we'll be able to attract newer ships. And then lastly, on shipping the small crafts, I've spoken in public about it before. Everybody knows how I feel, that we need to bring order to the water sports and the activities that are being carried out in relation to water sports and small crafts. I felt that we've had several conversations over the last year, specifically with the jet ski operators, and I feel that the time has come for greater discipline, and we have a proposal that I will discuss here later, perhaps, to address some of those challenges. And then in coastal zone management, and last of all, in coastal zone management, Madam Chair, I am so pleased with the work that is being done in coastal zone. My only complaint for Dr. Brewster has been that given the amount of work that he's done and is doing, he has been shy in telling Barbados about it. But they have been doing transformational work. As it stands, they're working with some NGOs to help rebuild coral, and you know the need to rebuild coral in Barbados is essential. They have about 3 or 4 new ideas, the A-frame, the nursery, the coral tree, I mean, very nice things. And then lastly, the last thing I will address here, Madam Chair, is the National Coastal Risk Information Planning Platform called NCRIP. The NCRIP is the most transformational tool that I've seen in our arsenal in relation to climate change. And it advances us significantly more so than any other island in the region. What NCRIP does is that it allows us in a way to not really predict, but it tells us in the event of certain events, in the event of certain disasters, which areas are more likely to be impacted by flood, by wind, by a quake, so that you can plan even before there is an assessment. Before there is a disaster, what it also does is that it allows you to quantify the damage, so that you could say if something happens, this will be the cost. If you have the damage to the housing, the damage to the hotels, and it could tell, a person could then say, I would spend $50, for example, and repair my house, because if I don't, I would have to spend $300 by not repairing my house. And NCRIP gives you this amazing amount of information. It takes guesswork out of the equation. So in a nutshell, Madam Chair, those are just some of the many things that we have been doing in the ministry. I believe that in the last year, the ministry has established itself as being serious about the people's business, being transformational about the people's business. We've developed fantastic relationships with all the stakeholders. In fact, this is perhaps one of the first meetings that I've had where we don't have people outside of the ministry. I suppose that's how it is in this chamber. But we have fantastic relationships with all the persons in the industry, and I look forward to having this conversation over the next few hours, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Please move the head. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and appreciation to the Minister and his team for their presence, and to him for his presentation to set the stage for the discussion. And I'll get straight into a few questions I have. Now, this young honorable Minister he speaks, Madam Chair, he's one of the few ministers in the cabinet. He speaks with a very visionary tone, not just outlining or enunciating programs, but setting the programs and goals of his ministry in the context of some sound philosophy, ideology even. And I applaud that, and I think that that is the way it ought to be. So my first few questions, and perhaps my only questions for this evening until perhaps next time we meet, stem from my view. That is his approach to things. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would seem to me that this ministry is, let me put it this way, requesting a smaller vote than was approved for it last time. I may be reading the figures incorrectly. If I am, please put me right. Put another way, it would seem as though the Ministry of Finance is prepared to give this ministry a smaller vote than it did last time around. And if that is true, I'm a bit surprised at that, because it is new ministry with significant potential for contributing to the Barbados GDP. The digital creative economy, perhaps elements of energy policy going forward. But with this, additionally, I think are three significant areas for growth in the Barbadian economy. And therefore, if that is the case, that the vote is smaller this year, I would want the minister to give us a view as to how he looks at that particular matter. He spoke in broad and general terms, understandably. It's just his opening statement. But I hope that with some degree of specificity, as he continues to address the matters before us, he would identify for us the indicators in these estimates which speak clearly to the development of blue businesses in Barbados. Clearly, and in some instances in fairly primitive form, we have established some blue businesses in Barbados, obviously. But the potential is there for a whole raft of blue businesses to be developed if this ministry is properly funded and given proper leadership. So from the estimates, the numbers here, if you could specify some of the indicators that point to plans for the development of blue businesses in Barbados. Now, philosophically, historically, Barbados' economy has always reflected a degree of imbalance, a disparity based perhaps on class and what I call facilitated privilege. It is perhaps new areas of economic activity, new ministries such as this that can set the platforms for balancing the disparity, addressing the disparity existing between classes in Barbados where the privileged take the cake, the not so privileged may be afforded the crumbs. And I'm putting that in very crass language, but I'm sure the honourable member understands. And if he can tell us in clear, succinct terms how his efforts here, as outlined in these numbers, will seek to bring some redress to that particular matter. I'm sure he's going to, beyond referring to some specifics in his summary presentation just now, outline for us as clearly as he can a comprehensive strategy, 3 or 4 planks of the comprehensive strategy for the development of for the program of the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and the Blue Economy in his efforts to spur growth in Barbados, gender context where we see new businesses coming on stream and flourishing, where the unemployment situation is addressed, where foreign exchange is earned, where perhaps new strides can be made into new areas for potential export. A lot of words, but I'm sure he understands. And I will pause there for now.
Thank you very much, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Last year we were given in total $22,168,693. This year we have $20 million. It's a decrease of $2 million. And the reason for that decrease is simple. We had a project that we were working with the IDB. That project comes to an end. Part of it was that Barbados had to make a contribution to the project. And because the project comes to an end, we no longer have to put in those additional funds. So that is just in relation to the project. What we've done, because we felt the project was important, is that we've brought the staff of the project into the mainstream public service. So they now become public servants, and we will continue with the work. It's a lot of the work related to the NCRIP program. So in essence, the work of the ministry has not even nearly been compromised. In fact, it has been strengthened because we brought all the persons into the public service, 1. 2, in relation to the question in terms of the businesses that we are hoping to be able to create, the truth of the matter is that a lot of what we have to do in Barbados, government has to understand that its role can no longer be to be the provider of all things. I think One of the things that we have to be able to do is to help people develop as a business, help facilitate business, but also across the ministries, there are various things that are happening. For example, there was a aquaponics program that we did in conjunction with the FAO. That program, and I made a cry before, I'm making it again. There are 40 positions now that we would be willing to have persons who are willing to have businesses in aquaponics come forward, and once they recognize male and female, and to fill these places and be able to start their own business. We've been working with the Ministry of Small Business to offer a trust loan, so that while you do not see those funds recognized in these estimates, of course, the provision is made in another estimate to be able to offer small loans to business people, so that through the Ministry of Small Business, these loans will be made available to the persons who are interested to be able to start the business. So again, we're not working in silo. I think the Honorable Minister of Energy said we are one government, and indeed we are. So we'll be able to use those funds to be able to do that. I spoke briefly as well about the marine biotechnology labs, where we're taking the sargassum seaweed and trying to convert it into something useful. This again will create opportunities for persons. We're now working with a number of very bright young people who are doing amazing things with the sargassum seaweed, be able to generate revenue from it. There are a number of persons here, for example, I know everybody knows by now Oasis, who are taking the sargassum seaweed and making a soap from it and other products. We want to be able to strengthen them. There are other persons who are using the sargassum seaweed to make fertilizer. We also want to be able to work with them to be able to strengthen them. So while you will not see that spending here, there is that relationship being developed, and we're working with a number of international organizations. For example, UNDP is funding, in conjunction with the ministry, a number of these things. So that as we flesh out the ministry, it is our hope that through our partnership and through our facilitation, and not necessarily our expenditure, we'll be able to build out some of these businesses. The truth is that even with all the combined effort, in terms of what we're doing with sargassum seaweed, we are still treating to less than 1% of the total amount of seaweed. And I am more than willing to work with young people who have new ideas to help us address the sargassum seaweed problem. There is a Barbadian now in New Zealand whom I met with, who we are hoping eventually to be able to work with as well, to be able to convert some of that into a biomethane gas. Again, that's another area of small business that we would be able to see develop in relation to this. But if the Honourable Leader of the Opposition also asked about our vision and in terms of our overall strategy, this is the approach that the ministry took. When we came into office, we analyzed, and we are still working now with UNDP and IDB to fully strategize in terms of the areas that we would be able to generate even more significant revenue. But there were 4 pillars that we felt that were important. Health was one, both in terms of health of the ocean, where we're looking at what we can do to make sure that the ocean is healthy, but how having a healthy ocean can make human beings healthy. So what would be the activities, the kind of fish? When we ban plastics, for example, we know that a significant amount of plastics are now found in the fish. So health was one. The second was transport, marine transport. That's why we're talking about berths and jetties all around Barbados, so that we can move people along the coast, but also to be able to move cargo, take some of that bulk off of the island's roads and move it on the ocean as well. And we've put out an expressions of interest, and we have had some responses. We're seeking a more comprehensive response for these berths and these jetties all across the ocean. The others was physical development. We know that we have to build differently in Barbados. I spoke about the encrypt. The encrypt tells us what will happen in the event of a disaster. We're using that information. It's been incorporated in now to our planning processes to ensure that as people build out, they build with the ocean in mind, with the climate in mind, these eventualities in mind, so that the ministry is heavily involved in that. And then lastly, in terms of biotechnology, what we call the biofuture. As it stands, there are persons now across the world generating millions, trillions of dollars, really, from some of these marine genetic resources that are either found inside your areas, either found in areas outside of your boundaries or within your national jurisdiction. If we are able to pursue that and to work with people to do it, again, we could generate new areas of business, new revenue, because there are significant opportunities being made available there. The unfortunate thing, Madam Chair, is that people will go and seek thousands and thousands of samples, and only one sample would be worthwhile in the end. After 20 years, generate a product. But in the end, the revenue that you generate from it is so significant. Barbados could never do that on its own. We don't have the resources to spend 20 years pursuing the ends. But if we partner with persons, then we will be able to do so. It is important for us. That is why you will see Dr. Brewster going off at the end of the month to a conference on BBNJ, Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction, so that we defend our space and the ocean space just outside of it, so that if people find anything in those waters, we want to benefit from it too. And we've been defending those areas very, very hard. And I think these are potential areas of opportunity. We have partnerships, as I said, with UNDP. The University of Georgia is willing to help us partner to outfit the marine labs and to teach young people in Barbados the kind of technology that we would need to be able to advance. I just think it is a wonderful time. So these are some of the areas, Honorable Leader of the Opposition, and I hope I've answered the question. Thank you.
Honorable Member for St. James Central.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to begin by indicating to the Minister and his team at a constituency level my great pleasure for the work that has been done in the area of Folkestone in St. James. Obviously, it is a marine park, but it is a recreational place for the residents of St. James, one of the major recreational places in the north. And I feel it is only proper to congratulate the Minister and his team for the excellent work that they have done in that regard. At a ministerial level, obviously the Ministry of Tourism has to work hand in glove with the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy. And the truth is, ma'am, that very often I act for the Honourable Minister when he is not an island, and invariably it is the reverse. He often endures or enjoys, I'm not sure which one, the, the role of Minister of Tourism and International Transport when I'm not here. The Leader of the Opposition often speaks to this House, ma'am, in the context of asking us to outline government's growth plan. And I think that this ministry provides an excellent opportunity for a very direct answer to be given to the Leader of the Opposition. The conversion of seaweed, for example, into derivative products is but an example of the way in which this ministry is able to harness all of the possibilities existing within a 200-mile exclusive economic zone, which translates into a marine space that is 400 times our land space, and therefore in turn further translates into tremendous opportunity and potential for this country. The unitization agreement that was just done with Trinidad and Tobago, again in the energy sector, is a further example of the way in which the marine space can give life to new opportunities. But what I want to ask the Minister to do is to speak a little bit more expansively on some of the things that we must do, not only to complement tourism, but to place and reposition Barbados as being even more competitively located in the Eastern Caribbean. For example, the expansion of our ships registry, the development of facilities for maintenance and storage of yachts. And the truth is that we have a lot of yachting business in this country, and because of the fact that we have such a, and forgive me for saying it, ma'am, I want to be humble, but because of the fact we have such a highly sought after tourism product, a lot of yachtsmen come here. But the reality is, again, that we do not have the capacity to look after the yachts in terms of maintenance, and once they go overseas, where are those boats located, who maintains them? Not us. Unfortunately, it goes to St. Lucia. That is business that goes a-begging, and that has been a historical challenge for this country, ma'am. Now, I think it is an opportunity here for the Minister, who I know is looking at these matters, to speak extensively to the way in which they can be corrected. And the only other thing I would add, because I don't necessarily wish to come back, is the issue of the progress with regard to jet ski operations, and the ministry's ability now to become an efficient and effective regulator of a maritime transportation sector. And again, it corrects or is positioned to correct some of the long-standing structural challenges that Barbados has had. We have a marine space which is enjoyed by all of our locals, but it is almost as if you had the road network in Barbados enjoyed by all of the Barbadians without having a regulatory framework to properly ensure safety and efficiency and ease of the transportation process. That must now be replicated in the ocean. And not only for our purposes, ma'am, but again, I must speak as Minister of Tourism. It was only a few months ago that 2 people came here, got onto a jet ski, went off to the northern side of the island, and were never seen or heard of since that time. And if you go by only the folklore, the issues that need to be looked at are issues of maintenance, issues of proper registration, issues of proper follow-up on the requirements for operational processes with regard to these vehicles, the safety and well-being of all of their users. All of these are things that we tend to have taken for granted, but must now seriously deal with in the context of standards. And again, it is within the domain, not so much of the Ministry of Tourism. We just deal with the public relations fallout. But the corrective action takes place with this minister and this ministry, and I urge the minister to take the opportunity to share with the country what's happening there.
Thank you very much, Minister. I should tell you that the word is enjoy. I enjoy every time I get the opportunity to act for you, sir, and I trust you enjoy every time you get the opportunity to act for me. That being said, I take the point raised by the Honourable Minister. I actually thought he was going to ask me about Paynes Bay. I suspect he will come back and ask me about that later. To answer your question, Minister, there are a number of things that are happening, I think, that are directly related to tourists. You know, we did a study was done, I shouldn't say we did it, there was a study done, and that study showed that tourists are willing to pay an additional amount of money, even though they feel that they're stretched, if 2 things happen. If the money isn't going directly to the consolidated fund, 1, but secondly, and more importantly, if that money is going toward matters related to the environment, primarily the marine space. So we know that tourists care about what is happening in the ocean. We know that if they could see us doing more work in the blue economy space, that they would be willing to help us fund it. And so with that knowledge in hand, I think that is instructive in a way. It tells us that for us, for the tourists coming to Barbados, that this particular area is a very important one. And so it gives us the opportunity to be able to work with our tourism partners, to be able to do some of the work again in this space without putting any increase on government expenditure. There is also in plans and train what we call the Barbados Environmental Sustainability Trust, the BEST. And this trust will be comprised of the public service, the government, persons in the private sector, NGOs, and it will help us manage some of these things because they don't want the funds to go into the consolidated fund. People are willing to put money. Large, very wealthy donors are willing to put money toward the ministry or toward the country outside of the government. We create this trust, and we could start capturing some of these funds again to go back in to this very important space. But it's important that it is not seen as a tool for the whims and fancies of a government, even a government as disciplined as this particular government is. And so that is going to be important as we go forward. But there are a number of things that I wish to speak to, Minister, and I will try to be brief. In terms of shipping, for example, Barbados is positioned most easterly of all the islands in the island chain. And you would have heard the minister who just spoke, as well as the Prime Minister and myself, speak to the fact that our traditional relationship with Africa the last many years ago was one that none of us really feel proud of, in a situation where we use that ocean space only for trading in people against their will. And that for some reason we haven't seen it fit to revisit that ocean space and be able to use it for trade and to be able to use it for tourism and other things. And because of our most easterly poised position, I think it gives us an opportunity I know the minister was recently in Ghana. I know the Ghanaian president was also here. We're having conversations now about opening that space to be able to move people and move trade and cargo and just to be able to use that space that hasn't been properly utilized because I suppose because of the mental punishment of the history of it all. But we want to trade now using that space on our own terms. And I think that opens tremendous opportunity for Barbados in terms of just being able to trade and to move tourists from off of Africa. Barbados positioned itself in that regard. But in terms of general shipping, by doing the things that we have to do to correct the flaws that we found in the overall system, the legislation being flawed, our inability to monitor the pollutants on the ship, our inability to monitor the ships generally, I think once we are able to, and we're doing it now, pass the legislation to be able to better command and control those areas in relation to shipping, we open up a new area. I mean, there are a number of ships willing to work with Barbados once we show that we are serious. And that is why by the end of this year, I was hoping by the end of the financial year, but by the end of this year, for sure, we'll be in a position, having passed significant pieces of legislation that positions Barbados as a serious place. The other thing that we are doing is the marine managed areas. The marine managed areas, for us, serve a number of purposes. Folkestone is already characterized as a marine protected space. We're making that space a little bit wider. We're now going in the west coast from Fitzvillage to Weston. And on the south coast, we're going from the Pierhead to Rockley and managing that space. What we would do, in essence, in having these spaces established as marine managed areas, that would allow the biodiversity there to replenish itself. It would allow us to monitor the water. It would allow us to be more cautious about the runoff from the land because a lot of our pollutants are land-based pollutants. It would allow us to think seriously about that space. And what that would also allow us to do is to help effectively rebuild some of the coral that is now in that area as well. We know that tourists want to see the coral. We know that tourists want to have healthy spaces. We know as well that tourists are concerned, as well as Barbadians rightfully, that the behavior of some of the small craft operators, particularly some, not all, but some of the jet ski men, that puts their life at risk. And once we manage that space properly, we will put ourselves in a position to effectively reduce the challenges that they're currently having with these operators. And I will tie this into your question, Minister, because we've just had a meeting in the ministry, a few meetings. We've met with a number of the stakeholders, including the jet ski operators. And we've determined that we wish to use the South Coast, there by Carlisle Bay, as a pilot, where we want to structure how people enter and exit the water. As it stands in the legislation, there are already coordinates, you know. There are areas where people should be entering and exiting. There is a speed limit, I think it's 5 knots, that is not being monitored at the moment. So we know that the issue may not only be legislation, but it's also how we monitor it. And that is why we're going to have to strengthen and have more personnel in those areas to monitor that behavior. The truth is, it is only a case of one person getting injured that will change this whole conversation. And I would like to be able to solve that problem before it happens, because it really is like a piece of glass in the sand, you know, an accident waiting to happen. And so we're working to be able to correct that as well. Barbados must have a yachting facility. It is mind-boggling. I would like the chairman speak in more detail to it, but it is mind-boggling to me that Barbados, with the best beaches in the world, that Barbados, that is one of the flattest places in the world, right now Barbados has breeze all through the year. There are very few islands that have that opportunity because they're butting into mountains. They don't have Barbados. You can guarantee, if you're a yachty, if you're a sailor, that you're going to get a breeze. And we don't have the facility. The reason the people are not coming here is only because we don't have the facilities, not because they don't want to do business here. And that is why what we're doing in the port is going to be very important. I wish the chairman would come forward now. And I also think the separation of cargo and cruise is going to be vital in terms of being able to offer a better tourism product. I had a friend who just went on a cruise around the Caribbean, very excited about Barbados, until he came back and said to me, well, Barbados is now falling behind. He had cruised last time about 9 years ago. What happened to Barbados in the last 10 years? I think the question that the former Prime Minister asked is, how did we get back here? You know, the wanton neglect of the country has put us in a position now where Barbados is falling behind its neighbors. We should have a yachting facility, and the chair will speak to that in a second. I think Overall, we've done a number of things that will bring tourists back to the island, I think. There are other water-based activities that we should now be offering. I would like to see us have a water park. I've already expressed there's some things that I will not support, even as I try to bring more tourists to the island, because I feel that we have to be respectful of various ecosystems. I'm not prepared to do certain things, but I feel we can offer much more exciting tourism products as well. But I'll let the chair speak in more detail to some of the things we're doing in the port.
Thank you, Minister. Madam Chair, just to follow on from Minister's point about the yachting. So we have had we made a policy decision, as Minister has said, to separate cruise from cargo. But we've also disaggregated what cruise means for different demographic groups within the cruise sector. And within that group, we have found obviously a high level of demand for yachting services. And not just yachting for the purpose of moving pleasure, for pleasure craft moving, but also the maintenance and the dry docking of those boats for the persons who are the mariners on them. And so we have just, I believe, 2 Fridays ago, closed the first expression of interest for the expansion of the shallow draft marina, and our tenders and procurement committee meeting will take place within the next 2 weeks or so, where we will be receiving and reviewing the expressions of interest for a new design and new build format for the shallow draft facility in Bridgetown. In addition to that, the Speightstown facility that Minister made reference to is also meant to be a multi-purpose facility. So while we're talking about cruise ships with a capacity of no more than 1,500 passengers or so being accommodated in that facility, we're also talking about mega yachts. We have 2 marinas currently, Port St. Charles and Port Ferdinand, and in those 2 facilities, super yachts are too large to be accommodated there. And you will see from time to time they will make their way into the Bridgetown port. For example, over the last few weeks when we had issues with the North Swells, there were some vessels that had no alternative but to be accommodated in the Bridgetown port. And as Minister said, the issue is capacity. So on a 5-ship day, we were using all of the available berths for cruise ships, and we're servicing cargo. That becomes a real challenge in terms of capacity. But we don't want to see it as a capacity challenge. We want to see it as a new industry opportunity because the demand is there. So we're looking at that expansion in those 2 locations, and then of course providing a new industry out of that new sector that would come up for maintenance, servicing, repairs, and dry docking of those boats for Barbadians who are looking for an opportunity to get into a new sector.
Thank you.
Ma'am, I had indicated I really didn't necessarily want to do all 3, but I will come back only to say that one of the things I had spoken to was the issue of the operations of the correction of the regulatory environment which governs the operations of jet skis. I'm not sure that the Minister spoke directly to that, but I would want to invite him to do so.
Minister, I would let the Chief Technical Officer address the question, but just to give you the assurance that this thing has occupied me and I have occupied her on it consistently now in relation to finding a solution to this issue. And I believe she is in a position to give some detail as to where we are in relation to this matter.
Thank you, Minister. Just to follow on from what the Minister has said before, we have had several meetings, at least 3 or 4 meetings with the water sports operators and at times specifically with the jet ski operators in terms of how the operations on the water. Late last year, we had a site visit to the various channels or the routes by which the jet ski water sports operators enter and exit the water to conduct their water sports activity in order to agree on the coordinates for these channels, as we call them. In our water sports order, shipping water sports order as it currently exists, there are several areas of water sports activity, but we have not defined those coordinates for which the vessels can move to and fro. And because of that, and we have had some several complaints and some complaints about the manner in which they enter and exit the water. So we would have gone on a site visit with the Barbados Coast Guard, the Royal Barbados Police Force. The Ministry of Tourism and International Transport was also invited, and they did attend the site visit, as well as representatives of the Water Sports Association. And we had concluded or agreed on certain points or coordinates for these channels, which were then plotted by the Coastal Zone Management Unit. Thank you for that. We now have to just review those coordinates with all the representatives who were at the site visit. And we're hoping then that once that is agreed, that we can go and amend the water sports regulations so that we can have those channels defined so we know for sure, and it is within the law for the route to and fro for the water sports activity. There's also been discussion of some type of GPS to be on the vessel so that that vessel can be monitored in cases of loss or any other circumstances where we're unable to locate the vessel. And when we did have that meeting, there was no pushback on the GPS, so we are intended to also put that in legislation. The minister also mentioned the no-wake zone. That means that when you are approaching the beach, you should not have like a wave, or is that what you call it, the wave behind the wave water behind the vessel. Wake, thank you, wake. Behind the vessel, so that you know for sure that it is moving at an acceptable speed that will not cause any harm to persons who are nearby. So we're actually trying to amend the legislation. I know the legislation is just a piece of paper, but once we have that, then we should be able to at least appropriately regulate and monitor to see that the activity is conducted in a safe manner. We are amending, as I said, the legislation, which will include those things, and we're also looking at the safety of the vessel, in terms of life jackets and so on, and the issuing of instructions to persons who rent the vessel to ensure that they have been given the instructions and they have accepted those instructions and it is properly documented. So coming out of the discussions with the water sports operators and with our patrols like the Coast Guard and the Royal Barbados Police Force, we're hoping to strengthen these pieces of legislation and create a safer environment for the operators and their clients. Thank you.
Let me just add quickly, Madam Chair, just very quickly on the same question. Oh, say your name.
I'm sorry, I'm Jacqueline Blackman. I'm the Chief Technical Officer in the ministry.
Just very, very quickly, Minister. You know, I also said that we are designating properly Carlisle Bay as a marine managed area. And one of the bigger issues that we've had is most of these issues actually occur in Carlisle Bay, most of them, not all, but a significant portion of them. You called me, or was it the Minister of Energy called me during cabinet to show me a Jetski operator in my face doing figure eights and other fancy things in the middle of a space that he should not even have been. So once we properly designate with lots of persons in the water and so on, when we properly designate it as a marine managed area, they won't be allowed to be there in the first place. So that's the first thing. As long as you see a person in the space, then we would know for sure that they're already violating the law. But also because we need to have a better relationship with the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard is doing significant work for us. I make a call, a Coast Guard is always nearby, or if he's not nearby, he will find his way to do it. But I think we might need one or two persons who are based as well on the water to be able to monitor for us. But once we start structuring it, where you have to come on mornings, give us your name, report your jet ski. I mean, we have to put the structure in place, and I am hopeful, and the CTO knows, but I'm hopeful that in a month, at most 6 weeks, I'll be in a position to bring this to Cabinet with a definitive position as to exactly how it is going to look. But most of the groundwork has already been done. The Coast Guard is involved, the Marine Police is involved, the jet ski operators. We had a meeting with the BHTA, so they're also involved. We brought all the stakeholders into the conversation, but bringing discipline to that space is perhaps one of my more pressing concerns. So we will have it resolved in short order.
Thank you, Madam Chair, I was almost hoping that you didn't notice that I was one of the first ones to be up because because I have a lot of questions for this minister and this ministry. And I'm conscious too that we will wrap up shortly, and I hardly know where to begin. I will begin in a gentle place. I want us to ask as my first question about a program in your ministry, and I'm aware that you did receive supplemental resources to move some of the officers on the encrypt program into your permanent complement of staff, which I think has been very important. This is a census year for Barbados. And as I said in this chamber recently, not many people get excited about the idea of a census, but I do. It's not the sexiest of things, but from the economic affairs and investment, and in fact, for most of the productive sectors, for most of the social investment sectors, it gives us a very good understanding of what is happening with the people of Barbados and how we should therefore develop and define policy that affects them. Now, your encrypt program provides very important information that we hope to be able to combine with census data and other kinds of social and economic data to tell us some very important things. I want you to tell the country really through the chairwoman of this committee, what do you envision as some of the utility of this encrypt program? It was begun under an IDB project, and I caution us, I've been hearing in this chamber a lot this notion of IDB funded. It's not IDB funded. The resources are acquired through a loan operation of the bank, but we borrow this money, we have to pay it back. And so I want to hear a bit about what you envision as some of the utility in terms of climate resilience, mapping for disaster, how we can combine some of the census data, and what really is the importance of this program.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I would allow Ricardo, who is head of the project, to speak to that, please.
Thank you, Minister. Ricardo Arthur, Project Manager, Coastal Zone Management Unit. Sorry. So the encrypt is really a new tool that Coastal will use in terms of planning. So we had a core focus in terms of resource protection and erosion management. We're now looking through the lens of financial analysis. So you're able then to look at a coastal sector and determine the potential losses due to a range of hazards. So you're not only looking at a sector and saying 5 meters of erosion within the last 20 years, you're going to be able to say, if we have a 1 in 50 event, you're going to have approximately $200 million worth of damage in this sector. And more importantly, how can you go about mitigating those losses? So the encrypt tool is really about incentivizing resilience in a positive way, and we have to get that information out there. Because there's this thinking that, information of this sort can be used in a way where, people get scared in terms of investment. However, I believe it will provide a competitive advantage because you're going to be able to come to a country and understand what your exposure is, and then you can also look at how you can implement value for money mitigation measures. You can almost do a cost-benefit analysis. So the encrypt exists at that level in terms of encouraging resilient investment. And then it also, from the level of long-term planning, what critical infrastructure is there on the coastline that the government of Barbados would need to protect, what critical infrastructure needs to be operational during and following events that may need to be moved. So at that level, in terms of policy and governance, it is also critical. The individual level, the governance level, those combined, it is really about understanding probable losses in real terms and implementing value for money solutions to ensure resilience. Hope that answers the question.
So, Minister, I think Ricardo's answered the question, but in a way, you know, the census is going to be very important for us, and I'm glad that we are in a census here. The truth is, we will then have much more accurate data in relation to how many households there are, the kind of households, whether it is made of stone, whether it is made of wood, whether they have inside facilities, the actual number of people, the children in the household. Hopefully, this census will tell us the kind that we get in the poverty study, the ages of those children, the health statistics of the children as well, so that when we are actually monitoring the encrypt, and because we have to constantly update the information, when we're looking at it, we would have a much more accurate picture as to the number of people who may be affected. For example, I like to randomly pick a community and say in Bayville, you know, in the Bayland, or Beckles Road, or one of my areas. Random. If, for example, there is an event, because we are, I mean, it is a good example only because we are so exposed. If there is an event, how many persons currently are in Beckles Road, for example? And who is likely to be impacted by that? And the census would give us all that extra information. So the census actually would be essential for feeding into the encrypt, and I hope vice versa, the encrypt could feed back into the census. But the encrypt is, you have to see it to believe it. The encrypt basically is an island-wide, gives you island-wide coverage as to the buildings, I mean, what do you call it, different levels of the earth, and like where, if we were to get wind, if we were to get flooding in the Bayland and it came to a certain amount of distance into the community, how many households would be damaged? If I knew the census information, I could guess how many lives would be impacted by that. If I knew where they worked, the information from the census again, I could start to calculate some economic value. The businesses, if the potential for them to be lost, depending on whether they've built resilient or not, the capacity to bounce back or bounce forward, as I say, that kind of information would allow us to more effectively plan out as we go forward. So as a resilience tool, it really is the most important and most effective initial part of the planning process and in part of the long-term exercise as well. So I think there's a natural marriage between understanding what we do with the encrypt and the census data.
Okay, my second question has to do with something that was mentioned earlier. The Honorable Minister of Tourism and International Transport made reference to building out the sectors that we can build out in collaboration with this ministry. The importance of yachting facilities, and you spoke to it earlier. But I am more interested, for the purposes of this question, in the who. I know that we spoke about a Seafarers program. I confess that I am not fully aware on where we are on the numbers that is impacting and the scope for those people to find employment in an expanding maritime sector. There are many young men and women in St. Michael South Central who are interested in new and emerging sectors. They're young men and women who, despite our best efforts, they do not want to be in a building, in air conditioning, putting on a tie and saying yes sir and no sir. They want to be outside in the fresh air, either riding a horse. And Minister, we are neighbors, and we share a kind of a cohort or category of young people who have interests in very specific things that are unique to where they come from. So they want to be able to get involved in horse grooming or something associated with horses. They similarly want to be able to walk to Pebbles Beach or to some other beach area and earn an income being outside, working on the sea. And so I want to hear from you, if I can, and your team. What are the plans for really involving young people in the building out of this sector?
Thank you again for the question, Madam Chair. So, you know, my team again would tell you that whenever I speak, I'm speaking about ordinary people. I want to make sure that no matter what we do, first of all, we do not compromise the capacity of those who've already been in the sector to be able to live, but to bring ordinary people into the space as well. And I feel it is very important that as we build out the sector, it must not be a case where it is a situation where we almost, in a derogatory way, refer to people who, you know, couldn't get another job, decide to go and do this kind of thing. And I think we're on the same page, Honorable Member for St. Michael South Central, because these are real opportunities. And I will give you a few. In the crew sector, for example, we are told time and time again, the Honorable Member for St. James Central would also know, and the Chairman knows, that we are told time and time again that the cruise ships would love to have Barbadians on board. They would love to have Barbadians on board. And we've been offered spaces, but they want us to train up the persons who come on to the cruise ships, if we could offer the necessary training. And that is why we currently have a program that we've been working with the SJPI, as well as the Vocational Training Board, to be able to finalize, to offer the kind of training that would put us in a position where we trained up a significant number of Barbadians to work on the ship. The last number I heard, there were thousands of positions open, as long as we start to train up Barbadians appropriately. And that is why the program with the SJPI is of such vital importance to us. And that is why we are working to make sure that that happens, and to be able, first of all, to meet that need. Secondly, in terms of the opportunities in yachting, when we start to create the yachting industry, there are a significant number of jobs. The Chairman spoke about dry docking. There are a significant number of jobs. It's a whole industry that is built up around a yachting industry, around a dry dockyard. Persons are required to clean the boat. Persons are required to do minor repairs, repairs to the inside of the vessel. I mean, it's a whole industry. And the paper that we will be bringing to Cabinet very shortly will speak to some of these positions that are possible. We are having linkages now with I actually was supposed to have a meeting this morning. I wasn't feeling great, but a person who is in the industry with whom we will be working as well to do some training in that space. We've had conversations, and we're supporting young people now. Very soon I'll be telling my honorable colleagues, and I still consider the member for St. Michael West to be my colleague, so I'll be telling him too about the number of positions that we may have for persons who are interested in sailing, for example. We're working with the sailing club as part of the yacht club to be able to train regular people. I've said to them in my meetings very clearly, you know, I want to see young boys from St. Michael South and South Central being able to come, use the facilities, be exposed to sailing, because there's also opportunities. A lot of the people who are trained, they would tell you, once they train up a person, somebody snaps them up. They don't last, because there are all these opportunities available. So I think we've already made the funds available. We should be training, I think, about 50 or so persons during the course of the year to start with. And once those persons are trained, it is highly likely that they would find opportunities as well to be able to start a real career. As I said, as soon as a person is trained up, they're almost immediately taken. That's the tragedy of it all. But at least it would be it's a good tragedy. Thank you, member. It would be a good tragedy because then people will have the opportunity to generate income outside of Barbados. You know, one of the things that we must not do, I think, is limit our understanding of the economic possibilities to the 166 square miles that is Barbados, or the 424 times size ocean space that we have. Because we're able now, the world is our oyster. We should be sending Barbadians all over the place and hoping that they would send back some of those funds as well. In fishing, honorable member, we are looking at simple training program. The chief would speak to it maybe, where we're discussing having young people come and work on a dinghy. We're going to partner them with persons who are seasoned in fishing so that they could just go out, learn the ropes, learn the rudimentaries of it all, become exposed to the ocean, because a lot of people, unfortunately, one, can't swim, and two, have no real relationship with the sea. Have no real relationship with the sea. And I think it's important that we get persons back there. So we're going to be using this program. We've already spoken to some of the fishermen who are willing to train young people to come and work with them as mentors. We're going to give a small stipend. Again, you're going to hear us discussing that in greater detail in the very near future. And then I think there are other opportunities. I think the sargassum presents the greatest opportunity. I really do. I think the number of opportunities to be able to convert sargassum into something is going to be fantastic. We've also had persons who now in Barbados have taken potato skins and making biodegradable plastics. I think every time we implement, because people see the ban on plastics as just a ban on plastics, I think about the new emerging opportunities for everybody. For everybody. The persons who, the Oasis boys, one of them live in my constituency. I mean, they're ordinary Barbadians doing transformative things. And so I think when we implement a ban or when we put in a restriction, there are people who are out there generating new ideas that we can't even begin to grasp. So I just think these are some of the opportunities, Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central. And as we are partners both in the constituency and in the Parliament, I will be sure to give you more details that you may require.
Madam Chair.
I will get back in line on Friday when this ministry resumes. But I do, if the Leader of Government Business will allow me a very quick follow-up, which is that it may not be that quick in the end, but I do want to ask this question about the relative relationship, Minister, between your ministry and the work of the ministry that went before you in terms of the responsibility of the NCC when it comes to the operations on the beach. Now, my particular query has to do with a matter that we discuss many times over, that I have occasion to discuss many times over with some of your officers, including Dr. Brewster, from a planning perspective. And it has to do with this issue of the notion of ownership of the beach and the question of the high water mark and what does it really mean for Barbadians. Because we have a recurring situation where people are not clear on what it means to say that all beaches in Barbados are public. And what does ownership down to the high water mark mean from a commercial perspective in terms of how much can you control in terms of what happens in that space? So you have situations where commercial operators are saying, you cannot come walk past this point, you cannot come and talk to your friend who may have come through this operation, be wearing a wristband, sitting down in a beach chair. You can't come and offer them one of your fish cakes that you bring from home. I think that it is, and Minister, I really don't mean to put you on the spot in this regard, but I'm asking because at the end of the day, we are here to represent Barbadians and to be able to defend the patrimony of this country. And even from an investment perspective, as I want investment and growth, and that is the reason I work in this ministry, the reason I am here in this honorable place is because of regular Barbadians from St. Michael South Central who put me here and who want to enjoy their access to the beach. So I understand that it's not a short question and perhaps not a short answer, but I needed to be able to put it on the table this evening.
Well, thank you for the question. I will begin and I would allow Dr. Brewster to speak some of these specifics. Look, I've spoken to this in Parliament before. I've spoken to it in public before. I understand the concept of ownership, and I support it. You own some part, you own some part. But I do not in any, even the smallest iota, support private beaches in Barbados, period. I do not support people hindering access to other Barbadians, period. Because the law is very clear. Even though you may own to the high water mark, public access is guaranteed. So you should not be violating the rights of Barbadians to have access to the beach, period. So any person who's engaged in that behavior is violating the law. As it stands presently, that law sits with and the management of that space sits with the NCC. It doesn't properly sit with the ministry. I hope someday it does. but it doesn't properly sit with the ministry at the moment. My view on the matter is very clear, and that while you may own to the high water mark, because that is what is provided for now, it also provides for access to the beach. And we've seen some people engaging in grandmother kind of folly. People going in the dead of night and planting trees so that people, because they feel they own the beach. And we've seen people now, debates between big men, you know, the 7 elephants fighting mice and getting the do. But you've seen situations where business people now having a feud and one man putting up a fence and all kind of like childish things when we're trying to manage a public space. Like you, Minister, I find it very offensive if anybody attempts to deny Barbadians access to the beach. It is written into our DNA that we must freely have access to the beach. Now, the law, unfortunately, as it stands, is the law. And it says that the person who occupies the space owns to the high water mark. The thing about the high water mark, as Dr. Brewster will explain, I'm pretty sure, is that the high water mark is a moving target. You know, once the water comes in, the high water mark is there. If the water goes out and the beach starts to accrue and accrete, there's more and more beach. The high water mark goes further, it goes further and further back. You suddenly own more and more of the beach. Because you think you own more and more of the beach, you feel like you can put down chairs from the point where your building is almost to the water. Those things are wrong. And the NCC, even now, even though I think the legislation needs to be strengthened, but even now with the current legislation, the NCC still has the right to go and tell somebody, you are denying Barbadians access to the beach. Move those chairs. And I think the NCC must, in stronger terms, enforce what the law allows them to enforce. But there are some technicalities. I would like to think that at some point we may review the legislation. But that being said, for the most part, people who own to the high water mark, for the most part, are not really violating, for the most part. For the most part, people who own to the high water mark are having consultations with the government. They recognize that the beaches, all beaches in Barbados are public. And if we done the islands, those beaches would be, when we do them, those beaches would be public too. All beaches are public, and they recognize it, and they have the conversations and the consultations, but there are a few people who feel that they now are above the law, and that they refuse to engage NCC, they refuse to listen to NCC. In some cases, there are also people who were given permission, who have taken that permission to mean that they could take the chairs from here into the water itself. So those people too have to be checked. So it's all kinds of problems. But I feel that NCC has already started treating to the matter very seriously. The only person who I think is more serious about this matter than me is the minister responsible for NCC, the Honorable Member for St. Michael East. And anybody who knows the minister for St. Michael East would know that there is no way that he is going to allow anybody to feel that they can own the beach to the extent where they deny the average Barbadian from granting for having access to the beach. I am more than comfortable that he will address this matter, that we've already started addressing the matter. We've had meetings with the Honorable Member for St. James North, the Minister of Tourism, myself, the Honorable Minister responsible for the NCC. So it's a conversation that is ongoing, but I would let Dr. Brewster speak to some of the more intricate details of the legislation, if necessary.
Thank you, Minister. Madam Chair, Leo Brewster, Director of the Coastal Zone Management Unit. I think the Minister has pretty much summed up what I was going to say. From the technical end, obviously, yes, ownership of beach lands does fall to the property owner in terms of ownership up to the high water mark. And the high water mark position is used as a position of reference for building in terms of setting back policies for construction of both fences and the structures that are going to be placed on the beachfront area. Okay, so the distance for any fences or enclosures is supposed to be 10 meters or 30 feet from a normal high water mark position on any beach. Depending on the size of the beach, it is set as a minimum. It is not set in stone as that is the ultimate setback limit. It's supposed to be a minimum of 30 meters. Yeah, a minimum of 30 meters, but it can be more. So when you measure from the high water mark, if you have sufficient room and space to set back further, especially any fences or enclosures, you can set back much further landward. This has been the case that has been applied within Carlisle Bay, which is one of the most controversial locations where what the minister is talking about has been experienced. And as you walk along Carlisle Bay, you will generally find that properties do not extend past the old seawall, which used to run along Carlisle Bay that you see at the base of the Esplanade, etc., going all the way down, because that's where the majority of warehouses and buildings used to be. So they don't extend onto the beach as accreted over the last 60 years. What you will find is that some fences have encroached onto that beach space to cordon off areas, but they do not go all the way down to 30 feet from the high water mark, principally because of what the minister has identified as the understanding of the need for the public access to those spaces, okay? As has been rightfully identified, you have property owners that are taking it upon themselves from about 7 o'clock in the morning or earlier to put down a minimum of 5 rows of beach chairs, literally stretching from in front of their property all the way down to the high water mark, to exclude the public from being able to use the free space of the beach area comfortably and freely, which means, therefore, that any person that wants to walk on the beach has to walk on the wet sand, the area of run-up on the beach where you call the foreshore. Okay, so the dry beach area, which is normally the area where people like to come and recreate and use, is being prevented from being used by the public because of things like beach chairs and other activities that are going on. The minister is also correct because under the NCC legislation does clearly stipulate that management of the space 30 meters landward of the high water mark falls to the NCC in terms of the overall management of that space. And that does not necessarily therefore mean that a property owner has the right to declare that they're going to put down and use up the entire beach space area. But what should be happening is that in areas where you're starting to see that activity taking place, the NCC should be entering into open discussions with those property owners to advise them as to what the law says, and therefore they can put down chairs in an area that they may deem comfortable for themselves and their guests, but other areas of the dry beach should be left available for the public to use. Okay? This has not been actively being practiced in the past, and therefore you have some of the sort of conflicts that you've experienced as you saw up in the areas of the Crane, which was heavily documented, and other such locations where you may have a conflict whereby NCC may be granting licenses for persons to use certain areas of the beach for beach chair vendors of a public nature to occupy the same space. The other thing that you find is that in other areas, once again in places like Carlisle Bay, because you do have vacant lands adjacent to properties that already are establishments in operation, those persons do not retain the beach chairs within the curtilage of their frontage of their property, but they extend on either side laterally because there's nothing next door to them. Yeah. So therefore, you will now have a property that may have had a 50 or 100 meter frontage, extending in excess of 150 meters or 175 meters because they've put chairs on either side of them because no one is next door to them, right? Further taking up space, and that is a space that technically NCC may be able to allocate for persons in a public situation to be able to rent beach chairs on, because as it stands right there and now, there's no property associated, no operational business associated with the property because it's a vacant lot. It doesn't mean that, 5 years from now, 6 months from now, a property owner may not determine to develop the site into something, and therefore those persons would have to be relocated because the property owner has the right to use the beach in front of his property. But at the same time, the level of negotiation that has to take place at the level of the NCC is something that has to be becoming more and more a mandated position where the legislation can be enforced. But as I said before, the high water mark is really and truly to identify a point of ownership of land as a measuring point from the seaward end to measure setback distances for development and construction purposes, as well as a generalized ownership. But because of the way how the NCC legislation is structured, it grants NCC the right to manage the space 30 meters from high water mark landward in terms of the area.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I beg to move that you do not report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
The chairman of the Standing Finance Committee has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the sitting be adjourned until Friday.
Suspended.
Suspended until Friday, the 6th of March at 10 a.m.
The question is that this honorable chamber be suspended until 10 a.m. on the 6th day of March 2020. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 10 a.m. in the forenoon on the 6th day of March 2020.